brain power and our protection in their bones for the eyes. Also, the body size and proportionality. These are what are called Bergmann's rule and Allen's rule, that cold adapted animals are large relative to their limbs. And so you get reduced surface area. You want your core to be big and your surface area relatively to be small. So you get things like woolly mammoths, right? So you get a great big animal, mostly core, and so its skin, where it loses its heat, is much smaller relative to what it contains inside the core of the animal. And so likewise, cold adapted animals are large, thick trunked. And Allen's rule is cold adapted animals have shorter limbs, and that reduces the surface area through which heat can escape. So a very thin and long-limbed creature is more warm climate adapted, and a short, stocky, thick animal is more cold adapted. And as you see, Homo sapiens, our species, come from a group of an ancestry that is heat adapted, whereas the Homo erectus that was starting to adapt to the environments in Europe were becoming increasingly short, stocky, short-limbed because there were cold environments there. So the hominin sites in Western Europe, there are some sites that are about 500,000 years old, but they're rare. Grandolina, for instance, is about 800,000 years old, and there are stone tools, flakes, and cores from there, and it could predate Neanderthals. So this is a site called Atapuerca in Spain that has a number of sites in there, and Grandolina is one of them. And this 800,000-year-old site with about 30 hominin fragments is probably one of the oldest in Europe. Another example is Icinera la Pineta in Italy, which is about 700,000 years old, and has a dense layer of more than 1,000 stone tools with some animal bones, but there aren't human hominin fossils there. These are probably related to what I was talking about, this transitional, not really still Homo erectus, but not quite Neanderthal yet, and so some people make a distinction there call it Homo antecessor. You also get the migration of tool types, right? So we saw that Acheulean technology for some reason didn't really catch on in China. But it does go to Europe and the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent, and also you get some variations where there are not that many cleavers, but in Eurasia, but hand axe bifaces, so hand axes are more variable than you get in Africa. And then you get some sites like in Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel that is about 780,000 years old, that has a mixture of some of these technologies. So flakes, hand axes, and cleavers, and some evidence for the use of fire and the eating of nuts as well. And so there are some in Western Asia, Southwest Asia, the Middle East, and a lot of sites in the Mount Carmel region in Israel. We have a really clear sequence of the development of Homo erectus into a more cold-adapted species that we eventually will call Neanderthals. So the Neanderthal spread, there's actually a slide there that shows that it covers most of Europe and into the Middle East and a little bit into Central Asia and the Arabian Peninsula. But outside of that area, we don't call them Neanderthals, and they don't really have the same characteristics or even the genetic makeup when we can obtain genetic material from the remains. But what were they doing? Who are these Neanderthals? Well, one interesting thing that was found was from the cave of Shanidar in Iraq. Dates to about 45,000 years old. I call him the old man of Shanidar. He probably died when he was just about my age. So that's sideways burn to myself. And that's pretty advanced age for a Neanderthal. Someone who was in their sort of mid-40s is, yeah, you're getting up there in age. He had heavy wear on his teeth. In fact, in certain patterns as well that showed that he actually was using his teeth as like a third limb. So he was probably, as you sometimes do, you use your teeth to hold on to something if you're doing things with your hands, right? So maybe, and the wear pattern shows he probably was using it to thread things through his teeth, so as he was maybe making clothing. And we'll come back to that in a moment, because that's another tool. Clothing is a tool to adapt to cold environments. He had a very large brain, as Neanderthals had. Humans, Homo sapiens, you and me, we have on average about 14 to 1600 cubic centimeter brains, whereas Neanderthals had a wide range, but up to 1750 cc's. So on average, even a larger brain than humans did. So it wasn't really about brain size. And again, that myth of that brutish, stupid ape man that the 19th century depictions of Neanderthals had is starting to throw out the window. But also, the old man of Shanidar, he had, I call him lucky, he had an eye injury that would have left him blind, I think in his left eye. He had amputated his arm, and someone must have helped him to do that. And his foot had such severe arthritis, he would have been completely hobbled. He would not have been able to have been ambulatory with any sort of degree of success. So, yeah, pretty lucky guy, right? But the thing is he reached a very old age. How are you going to hunt with a one-eyed, arthritic old man living in a cave in Iraq? How are you going to hunt? How are you going to survive that way? The only way we can imagine that being the case is if he had the support of his community. And so he wasn't just some unthinking brute. He was loved and beloved by the people around him, or the Neanderthal community around him. They must have helped him to survive into that old age. He couldn't have done it on his own. So Neanderthals also, they were adapting to cold weather, both physiologically. They had some physical changes that were taking place that were making them more suitable for cold environments. But they also were probably inventing tools that were allowing them to face these more extreme conditions that they did not come from originally in Africa. And also they were a community of people that was passing on these lessons. So maybe a 45-year-old Neanderthal who'd seen a lot of things was important to the community because he knew stuff, not just because he could get out there and hunt. That's what the younger people were for. It was that his brain was probably important too. So communities of Neanderthals were developing. And we see that these sorts of things are reflected, these sorts of community identities are reflected not just in that what I just described, but also when you don't have the physical remains of the individuals, you have the tools they left behind. And if you want to learn how to make a tool, you watch other people do it. So traditions start to develop, and this is where culture history starts to come in. So you have different manufacturing techniques that different communities have. And so you have these popping up in different little groups, clusters of communities that are doing things slightly different from the next one because they probably have different traditions. So in Boxgrove in the UK, you have they found debris from hand axe manufacture, both hard and soft pressure flaking, right? So, and also bones with cut marks. And hand axes you don't find them east of India. There are some Acheulean hand axes in China, but only very early on in Boza in China, about 800,000 years ago, and then they just sort of disappear. So maybe this came out of Africa as a technology, but then they found some other way to do it. Maybe something that was perishable. Maybe they had, instead of stone tools, they were using some other material that has decomposed and doesn't survive to us today. So it's different adaptations for different environments, using your brain to solve specific problems in those specific environments, using the tools and the technology and the communities that existed in each. All right, let's stop right there. I'll come back in just a second and we'll finish this up. Okay?